What is going on, everybody? What is going on, everybody? My name is JeffLightsyJr. here with the Black Boss Channel and Victor Formation. Thank you all for tuning in. Come on into the room. Come on into the room because we have a lot to discuss today. We have a lot to discuss today because I said something that apparently got a lot of people upset. I said something that apparently a lot of people did not agree with. But hey, it is what it is, and I'm willing to stand on it. And that is, I came out and made a statement that was clipped and was put on the internet, and everybody's going in on it. And I said that Jackson State was not only the biggest brand in the SWAC. I think Jackson State, the football team, the football brand, the football program, I want to make that specific, is the biggest brand in all of HBCU. I think they are the biggest football brand in all of HBCU sports, and I will stand on that. There's a number of reasons why I feel this way, but obviously, I can't do this on my own. I'm going to show you some examples and some things on why I believe they're the biggest brand. But I also had some special guests that will come in and they will tell me why I am wrong or right, or I don't know. They're going to say something though, but we're going to talk about it. So first of all, like I said, JSU, led by Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, it has been a whirlwind ever since he took over the job at Jackson State. In the 2 seasons, but the one fall season, the spring season, Coach Prime has made HBCU sports, specifically football, one of the hottest commodities in all of college athletics, period. Like, not just football, period. He is one of the hottest names as far as coaching at any level, professional or college, in the country. That is without question. And so a lot of times people want to agree with me on some parts and disagree with me on any parts. Well, here's a couple of things. There's a few facts that we have to put out there first. The first fact is that Jackson State not only led all of FCS in attendance, again, they broke the FCS record, and they're going to top that once again this season. That's a fact. That isn't something I just made up. That isn't something that I just pulled out of my butt. That is the truth. And that is something Jackson State leading the FCS in attendance is something they've been doing before Coach Prime. Now, that was something they were doing before Prime. Second, Jackson State's TV ratings. When we talk about the Celebration Bowl, no disrespect to South Carolina State. You got, no disrespect to Coach Pugh and what he's been able to do with South Carolina State. South Carolina State ain't drawing 2 million people to watch their games. South Carolina State isn't even in the top 10 in FCS in attendance. South Carolina State doesn't draw 10,000 people a home game. So you're telling me 10,000 people don't even go to their home games and they're going to draw 2 million viewers, 2.5 million for a Celebration Bowl? No, that's not how it works. So that is another thing. And thirdly, a lot of people keep saying you have to separate Deion from Jackson State. That is not true. You do not have to separate Coach Prime, Deion Sanders from Jackson State. Why? Because you cannot tell the story of Jackson State football ever. Like, moving forward, you can never tell the story of Jackson State football without speaking about Deion Sanders. You can never tell Deion Sanders' life story without mentioning Jackson State. I don't understand this whole, I get it, coaches leave, and I think that's part of the narrative. Everybody's expecting Deion Sanders to leave Jackson State like relatively soon. Like, everybody thinks he's going to leave either this year, like after this season or after next season. They damn sure don't see him making it the next 5 years or 10 years. You get what I'm saying? So everybody's expecting him to lose or leave, and therefore they're disassociating and saying Deion's brand is this, but Jackson State brand is this. No, they are one and the same. Anytime you see Deion Sanders on camera, you see him with what? JSU gear, JSU hat, a JSU blazer, a JSU, etc., etc. That is called brand recognition. That is called promoting a brand. That is called being a spokesperson for your university. And think about it. Every single thing that covers HBCU sports, that covers FCS sports, that covers college football mentions one name and one name only from the SWAC specifically, and that is Deion Sanders. And so I'm going to go into some other points, but I want to bring in my guest. I want to bring in Mr. Blue from the Blue Bloods podcast, and Miss Love Yard Talk TX from Twitter. She's the one that actually got all of this started. First of all, I want to ask you all, how are you all doing? And then I'll allow you to respond. Blue will allow ladies to respond first to anything that I said, to the video, to whatever's on your mind. Go ahead and go for it.
I'm good. I mean, you have some valid points. I just don't understand the beyond what you just said about them thinking that he's going to leave. Let's talk about what you said about every time you see him on TV, he has on Jackson State stuff. So it's like
Absolutely.
I don't understand the rush to disassociate your university from somebody that's giving you so much. I don't, and I'm not speaking for it. I'm out. I went to Grambling, so I'm not up here to speak for Jackson State. I'm just looking at it from from the perspective of Brandon, like you said. So I don't get it. Grambling is not trying to disassociate themselves from Hugh Jackson at all. Okay, we got the pivot coming on Saturday to the spring game, and we are going full in supporting our coach. So I can't make sense of it. We aren't talking about Hugh Jackson's going to leave. I have not seen nobody from Grambling say that. Granted, it's different because Hugh has. I look at that blue. I knew that's what.
Like it's a little different. A little different.
But he can still move. But he can still move up.
Absolutely.
So I don't get
it. Blue, I know you got some response. I know you had some responses on Twitter, man. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually agree with her completely. Is that I actually do think it's more likely that Hugh leaves Grambling before Deion leaves Jackson State.
Be true.
I mean, really and truly, and it's mostly because Hugh has already shown he can be successful at the next level. So a team's going to be more willing to take a chance on him at the next level, in my opinion, than they are a Coach Sanders, which has never coached anywhere outside of Jackson State. So for me, I mean, I completely agree with you on that. The only thing for me, so I guess where me and you, Jeff, differ is that like what we consider building a brand, especially a national brand, because for me,
absolutely.
One successful season like Jackson State had with Coach Prime, because it's really been one season. It's been one season in one calendar year. I don't think that gives you a leg up on the programs like Grambling and Southern, who have spent years building up their brand. So I would say Jackson State has always been a top 3-4 brand in the SWAC. I think we all three can completely agree on that. And Coach Prime has brought that to a whole nother level. But when you look at it, since 2000, they've won 2 SWAC championships. Since I was born, I'm 25, they've won 3. Grambling and Southern have combined for like 15. Grambling has won all these Black national titles. They've had Coach Eddie Robinson. Are we just going to ignore, for me, all that history, building the brand, what the G represents for one successful season? Because for me, a brand, if Coach Prime goes out there and doesn't win the SWAC again, it was all for nothing. Are we talking about the same brand?
I will push back on that because a lot of time on y'all shows, y'all will say, the history don't matter, so
I've never said the history doesn't matter. No, never. I got to go get you to find the clip.
On Outskirts show, he will say, "Well, what have you done for me lately?" He has, y'all will.
That is the thing. No, absolutely.
I've never had a G trash bag in my show. I've never done. Listen,
no, I'm just talking about the SWAC. I'm talking about SWAC period, not just Grambling.
Yeah.
Y'all have the conversation about, well, look at the numbers now. What happened, and it's a valid point. I think Scotty was kind of talking about it earlier today, about the difference between what happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the callers were calling in and saying, back in 94, and he kind of shut that narrative down. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so and that matters. Come on, y'all got to be,
And that's the thing. I will. No, Blue has a point. He has a point because we're never going to dispel Coach Eddie Robinson's legacy. We're never going to dispel what some of these other programs have done as far as winning and the things that they've done. But think about. But I want you, when we talk about brand recognition, we talk about brand recognition. Even when Southern was winning more recent SWAC titles than Jackson State, even when Grambling was doing what they're doing, were they Coach Eddie Robinson coached before social media. He coached before mass media. And even if mass media was here, because they've been here recently, HBCUs weren't getting the publicity and weren't getting the love like they are now because of who? One, Deion Sanders. And so we cannot ignore that. And one thing I will say, the reason why I say JSU has the biggest brand right now, obviously over time, I'm not going to disrespect Grambling. I'm not going to disrespect all the titles that they've won. But we're talking about right now, who has the biggest brand in the SWAC? And it's without question Jackson State. Why? Because of Coach Prime. And I don't think you can separate, because some people say, well, Deion has a bigger brand, because Deion's brand is bigger. I mean, if we're just being honest, it's bigger than everybody, every team as an individual. But he is now in step with what Jackson State is doing. And that's why I came out and said Jackson State has the biggest brand. That's why I came out and said Jackson State, because think about it, Blue. I want to show you something. I want to show you something that kind of goes with my point. So some of my favorite HBCU YouTubers are yourself or CFL or Scotty, and then I do some work, right? Now, if we take a look, I want to show you guys something, because this kind of proves my point. Let's go to Blue's YouTube page. And if you look at his most popular uploads, what do they all have in common? Jackson State. It's Coach Prime. Out of the top 6, these are 6 right here. Out of the top 6, well, all 6 of them are Jackson State. And out of the top 12, only 1 is not featuring Jackson State. Let's go to another one. Let's go over to CFL. All his top 12 are Jackson State. One has over 1 million views. Now, do you get a common trend here? Let's go to Scotty's. Let's go to Oscar. All 12 of these are Jackson State. So it means that their name, and this is just us as YouTubers. This isn't even taking into account the Dan Patrick shows. This isn't taking into account the Jimmy Fallons. This isn't taking into account the appearances on ESPN. This isn't taking all of those into account. And so what I'm saying is, like, the proof is in the pudding. If Grambling was as big of a brand now as they were in the 60s and 70s, and if Southern was as big of a brand in Jackson State, I mean, you do videos on Southern. I've interviewed Southern players. They don't get a fraction of the views, of the likes, of the shares, of the comments, of these things as Jackson State. And why is that? It's because Jackson State's the top dog right now. Jackson State is the go-to brand. That's any rebuttal.
No, I know. I mean, listen, I even said on Scotty's show on the phone that you were right, that this, like, with Deion, like, the way I put it is, so Jackson State was a top 3 brand anyway. Then you take Deion, who we agree Deion's brand's bigger than Alabama, USC. I mean, it's Deion Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just add that on top of what Jackson State already built. They're going to be the biggest brand in college football. Like, I've never disputed that. What I was more arguing back is that the brand of the college, like, outside of Coach Prime, like, from the clip that you dropped, I thought you were saying Jackson State is just bigger than everybody. And I'm like, well, you're kind of ignoring everything Grambling's done, everything Southern's done. Like, you're discounting everything that those programs have built. And yes, all the YouTube videos right now are hot, but let's just be honest here. Before anything happened, I mean, what HBCU Game Day was really the one program that's been around for the end of time.
Sports too.
Yeah, and them too. But was Jackson State getting 1 million views for a random practice clip? I bet my life savings. No. Like,
no, I agree.
So my whole argument.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Blue. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My bad. So my thing is, why? So another point, why is the SWAC running away from what works?
No, there's nothing wrong with it.
If random practice clips are getting 1 million views, why don't we have more random practice clips from other schools? It makes no sense to me at all that we are still having this conversation about what works when we've seen it at least since Coach Prime came. I don't understand.
My rebuttal to that is, what works for Jackson State with Coach Prime is not going to work for Texas Southern.
I understand that, but at some point you have to at least put in the work to try to see, because doing the same thing is not going to get you
absolutely
that's my point. It's not
going
to happen. But can you get a couple of thousand views? Yeah, you activate your
absolutely
alumni. In Texas Southern specifically, it's in Houston. If anybody got it going on, I mean,
you figure they would.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point because the thing is, when you elevate your brand, like I believe Coach Prime has done for Jackson State, there's no going backwards. Yep. Now, granted, say if Deion decides to leave Jackson State next year, say if Deion decides to leave in 2 years, 5 years, whatever, that is a way sexier job than it was before he got there. And so what I'm saying is now that he has elevated them to a certain status, to a certain stature, now the next head coach, you're going to be able to attract someone. Like, and they're not going to be, obviously they're not going to be Coach Prime. They're not going to be, him. He is a one of one. But you're going to be able to attract someone that normally wouldn't have looked at that job. And see, and the reason why I think also the Jackson State brand, we're talking about the brand and Jackson State and the elevation of it, not just with Deion Sanders, but Deion Sanders has been able to elevate everyone. I think everyone's brand evaluation has kind of risen because now everybody, like you said, Miss Love, you talked about how more people need to do more random practice clips, more whatever. That is what you're seeing. Grambling. I seen Grambling. I follow their social media. They're putting that stuff out. Hell, they just made a recruiting page. Alabama State, Alabama A&M, these different folks. And now they're like, okay. And now, since then, you've seen streaming services come to the SWAC. Was that ever? Streaming didn't just pop up yesterday. But we've got two major streaming services, whether it's HBCU Go and also the Urban Edge Network and what they're able to do. Both of them have struck deals with either SWAC schools individually or with the SWAC altogether. And so all of that is raising the awareness. All of that is raising what's taking place. And all of that goes directly back to Coach Prime, who was in lockstep with Jackson State. And that's once again why I said they're currently the biggest brand in the SWAC. And I don't really think it's that close. And then you add the fact that they averaged 42,000 in attendance last year. I think they'll get to 50 plus this year. And then you add the fact that they won the SWAC East and won the SWAC championship. And I get it, they lost to South Carolina State, and South Carolina State was a better team on that day. But South Carolina State ain't Jackson State.
Y'all be acting like NCS, don't even exist. Like, the media is like it's black, like their school's blacked out. And I get it, I understand, because like you said, Coach Prime is a bigger brand. But I do think that, in that regard, they do kind of get pushed to the side, even though they're the champs. It's that. I mean, I've never seen that happen because when North Carolina A&T were winning the Celebration Bowl, I mean, that elevated them. But I understand it's a different, set of circumstances now.
I will say it is a very small school. It's in a very small town. They've produced a ton of NFL talent, even recently, just a ton of guys. I think Dakota Durant will be another guy to make an NFL roster. But I think part of that onus is on them. They have to put the money behind marketing and have to put money behind, like, we were the David in a Goliath, in a David versus Goliath type fight. We were I was into it. And so I don't know, Blue, maybe you can give more perspective on that.
No, I mean, listen, I think every SWAC school has to, but it's like, for me, they all got to pave their own path separately because it's Absolutely. Like I said, it's not going to work because, listen, Texas Southern promoted the absolute crap out of their pro day twice. I'm talking about I had players DMing me promos. They made individual player promos. They had to move the date twice because no scout showed up. So this narrative that the whole SWAC's coming up, I'm not getting behind that. You know who's coming up? FAMU, because they already had a brand and they have the resources to put that in place. You know who else is coming up? Possibly Alabama A&M, because Connell Maynard is one of the best coaches behind the mic, and he knows how to promote his program. Grambling's coming up because they got a guy like Hugh Jackson coming in, and Southern is going to be Southern. We've already mentioned they're a top 3 brand, but the Valleys are getting left behind. Man, has anyone heard of Bethune-Cookman? I mean, I didn't even know they existed anymore. And then then you're looking at Texas Southern getting left behind by a million miles. Is UAPB even a thing anymore? No one knows about them. I mean, yes, the top 5 in the SWAC, they got it because they were ready for it and they already had brands and they're moving along. But even Alcorn a little bit is falling behind behind the way because Fred McNair is not that type of guy who's going to get up and just promote his program like that. He's not that type of guy. So for me, yes, the top 5's coming up. And if you want to say the whole SWAC is coming up, I got it, but it's really not, because what's going to happen is those programs who weren't ready to jump on this bandwagon, are getting absolutely left behind.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because, like you said, if you simply think about, I think we made a loss, Miss Love. We'll bring her back. But if you simply think about, like you said, those top schools, they're doing, or at least in the public sphere, it looks like they're doing. But the bottom of the SWAC, but Blue, I'll argue, can't you say that about any conference, right? Like, couldn't you say the same thing about the SEC? We know about the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Floridas. But do we talk about Vanderbilt? Like, do we talk about, like, do we talk about
in
some
baseball,
of these?
Yeah.
Well, but I'm saying, like, as far, if we're just strictly talking football, like football conferences, how football structures work, I think that's typical with any football conference. If you like the top of the top, the cream always rises to the top. In the ACC, it's always Clemson. This past year was like Wake Forest and Pittsburgh. But then, like, those schools at the bottom, like, I mean, I'm wearing my Louisville Cardinals hat. Ain't nobody talking about Louisville since Lamar Jackson left. You get what I'm saying? Like, we had that one game where Malik Cunningham kind of went crazy, but outside of that, nobody's talking about Duke football program. Like, those kind of things, I think the SWAC is kind of building upon its own and going through its own rough patches as far as that's typical of a football conference.
I would say the SEC is a terrible example. That's probably the one conference, like, I mean, because even their worst team, I mean, every single team has been ranked in the top 10, like, outside of Vanderbilt in, like, the past decade or so. Like,
I said them, but you're right.
Yeah, like, listen, I see the comments, like, from Tommy Burrell. Kentucky has been a top 10 team for 3 out of the past, like, 4 seasons at one point. And Arkansas was number 8 last year. Like, so Vandy is the only example you can use for the SEC not being relevant at every level. And then Vandy has won like 6 college baseball championships in the past 10 years. It's different in the SEC, but I do think you can use the Pac-12 as an argument. I think the Pac-12 is probably, if you're going to try to make an argument for a Power 5 conference, the Pac-12 is perfect because you got Oregon, USC, and then rotating years, I like to say, is somewhere between Arizona State, UCLA, and Utah. Those are like the 3 programs that kind of rotate in that 3rd, 4th spot. But then since Mike Leach has left, no, I don't think people remember Washington State's like,
not at all
university that competes. Oregon State hasn't been relevant since I think any of us 3 have been born. And so I mean, there's only so much there. So I think you can use
that little spurt with Jaquiz Rogers for a little bit,
or like when they had Chad Johnson, they were decent, but that was way back in the day,
very long time ago.
You definitely can use it. So I do think for like SWAC fans, we have to keep it in perspective because there's too many times, like on Scotty's show, on this show, even on my show, people like to try to compare it to the SEC. Let's leave it out. No one should ever be compared to the SEC in literally anything, the money, the promotion, anything. But for the Pac-12, it's also tough to compare to Power 5 conferences because all those schools are making money.
Now, one thing I will say to you, Blue, one thing, let's leave the Power 5 out, though. I saw you and Miss Love kind of have this back and forth about the SWAC schools, their brand recognition, and someone compared to an FCS school like a North Dakota State. Now, you were on the fence of saying that a North Dakota State is actually more sought after as far as it has a bigger brand nationally than most of the SWAC schools. What made you go into saying that?
Because when you look at it, I think outside of Grambling, Southern, and FAMU, nobody else even has like an argument to be above North Dakota State. And I mean, for me, when you look at it, I think so. I would like to ask you guys. I kind of want to get like y'all's perspective on this because for me, I'm an FCS guy, so like I can name all the like I know it. I pay attention to it. I watch it. So for you guys, I just want to see what you guys are thinking. Name your top 5 FCS brands right now.
FCS, just far as football. We're just talking football.
Just football. We're not talking academics. Just football on the field.
Yeah, just football. Well, the couple of that come to my mind, obviously James Madison. I know they're moving. North Dakota State, Sam Houston State. Those are like the schools but North Dakota State's the number 1 because they win the championship all the time. Like, and then they've had top draft picks recently, from Carson Wentz being a number 2 overall pick to Trey Lance being a number 3 overall pick. They just had a guy that ran a 4.2 at the NFL Combine. Like, so those are like, because they've sent guys high round in the NFL along with their winning the FCS championships. That's how North Dakota State instantly, outside of like the HBCU world, though, that without question is the first team that I think about.
Well, don't ask me because I don't really give much energy into non-SWAC, non-MEAC, non-HBCU sports. That's not really my thing. Just to be honest, I'm not finna try to sit up here and name names, and I don't really,
Hey, that's fair. Hey,
I don't
that's
follow
completely
them
fair.
like that.
No,
But
that's
I
completely
do.
fair.
I mean, I do know more about them since know more because I be following North Carolina A&T. So I have done my homework to see, okay, when they went to the Big South, what's going on with them, and then now the CAA, and so.
Yeah.
But other than that, my top 5 are in the SWAC.
Yeah.
And one in the MEAC.
Yeah. And so even with Jeff, I mean, he named 3 right now that he would have in his top 5. So what? The other 2 in your top 5 be Jackson State probably, and then you get to pick out a Grambling and FAMU most likely, maybe Southern if you want to throw them in the top 5. So where my I guess like passion comes from is because every single time I go live, every time Scotty goes live, there's this narrative from other channels and other people saying, one, nobody ever goes and watches other FCS programs. The SWAC's the only one that ever has full stadiums, only one that ever has passionate fans. And it's like, you're saying that, but you can't even name 5 teams from another conference. So how do you know that? And when you look at
you can look at the data. I mean, the data, I'm just saying.
That's why I was looking at you. The MVFC has the exact same number of teams in the top 25 as a SWAC, but nobody goes to their games.
Okay, well, that's a valid point. But the SWAC is still at the top, though. Even the SWAC championship game has more attendance than the FCS championship game. With that,
depending on where it is. Depending on where it is.
Okay, but I think debunked that. Blue, we already debunked that because we already gave you the screenshot on that.
Well, that's the Celebration Bowl. I thought you meant SWAC championship.
Okay, well, we're talking about 2 different things right now. Then.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why he says it depends on where it is because Jackson State obviously can hold 60,000, whereas no other school in the SWAC can hold about half of that. You get what I'm saying? That's why the SWAC.
The second biggest stadium in the FCS is Montana at 20 something thousand.
So then why wouldn't? Okay, because think about it. Jackson State hasn't been winning, but these schools have been winning. So what is the hesitancy there to build bigger stadiums?
Well, that was my point. Yeah, that was my point. If you take away Jackson State, the SWAC's just in the middle of the road.
Right. So
but Jackson State carrying it.
But that y'all are saying that they're carrying it right now, but they were carrying it even when they were not winning. So I don't know if that is an argument that can really be had, because even when they were getting all the 0-3 jokes when they first, their first 3 games and stuff, they were still above this bigger brand. So I just think that's a conversation that probably just needs to be tabled. Like, I don't.
You mean as far as attendance, correct?
Yeah,
you mean as far as okay? I'll just make sure.
Yeah, even when they were losing. So I don't think that we can really point at that and say, okay, that is what we can prove or disprove who has the bigger brand. I don't think that's a fair argument to make between both of the schools.
Well, no, that's why I agree. Twitter's a real tough place to have debates, especially because we're both responding to like different posts. And that's why I was like, bring it on here. So like my thing is like attendance is not a good marker of brand because one, what's a more popular and bigger city? Fargo, North Dakota, or Jackson, Mississippi?
Well, you can't have that argument either, because that's like saying, well, unless y'all move to school, nobody's moving to school. The school is where it is, right?
No, and that's what. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's easier to have a 60,000 person stadium in a state capital rather than Fargo, North Dakota. Like, so what I'm saying is there's other factors that play into attendance, which is why we can't use it for national brand.
That's what we're having the same conversation.
Yeah,
that's not even that can't be. You can't. Because win or lose, and then if you look at TV ratings, also even when Grambling went to the Celebration Bowl, they had higher ratings than the FCS championship with that winning team. So
you didn't like that, Blue. You didn't seem to like that too much.
No, here's why. Here's why. Because if it was flipped,
let me say this: if it was flipped,
no, I'm not arguing with that. Here, if it was flipped, how mad would people be, Jeff? If I came on live, if the Celebration Bowl was on ESPN2. And the FCS championship was on ABC with a bigger deal and everything. And I was on here talking all kind of smack saying, we got more views than you. what would they say about me, Jeff?
Why
What
though?
would they
Why?
say?
Because we're talking about brand, right? So why would a bigger brand have to take a cut like that, but a smaller brand doesn't? Grambling, the smaller brand, or the SWAC, the smaller brand.
So for the FCS National Championship, the contract was signed a while ago. So like Frisco signed like a giant contract, and the ESPN networks and ESPN2, ESPNU, and I believe there's one more, said they would rotate it. And the year it was on ABC, it got flexed to that for some like political reasons, behind the scenes stuff. So they're just in a bad contract like Jackson State was with Tennessee State. And it's not y'all's fault or nothing like that, but I'm saying,
okay, so
to me, it's kind of weak to brag about. If you got the better, like anything on ABC is going to outrate something on ESPN2, regardless of what it is.
That's not okay. So Grambling's brand, SWAC brand made the better deal in that regard. I don't know what the pushback is on that.
What I will say, Blue, though, I will say this though, to Miss Love's point, I believe that if ESPN or the folks over at Disney believed that this game could really, like, it's gonna do numbers, it's really gonna do like they believed it would with the Celebration Bowl, especially Celebration Bowl featuring Deion Sanders, they would flex that to ABC. They would make arrangements to make sure any and everyone who wants to see that game would be able to see it. They want to get as many viewers and eyeballs as possible. You've seen the way ESPN or ABC or Disney blew up the Celebration Bowl because Coach Prime was calling him out. He was saying, I don't want to play on ESPN 46. I want to play on the real thing. Like, so they kind of work. And also, the deal with the Celebration Bowl was already had with ABC. And I think that also helped. I think if the folks over at Disney really feel like, this is just my opinion, I could be wrong, if they really feel like North Dakota State or James Madison, or I know James Madison moving on, but Eastern Michigan or whoever can really draw 2.5, almost 3 million viewers, I think they would move it consistently to ABC. That would just be my opinion. If you think.
And so, like, the best example is the spring, I feel like, because one, the Celebration Bowl didn't really happen, and we can compare playoff games in, because since it was in the spring, everybody was on ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPNU.
Mm-hmm.
FCS games were consistently outdrawn SWAC games when on similar platforms.
So selective stats. So it's just they outdraw them
on a fair comparison.
Okay, that's fair in what regard?
Because they're on the same network.
But the spring game, really? I can't even.
No, not the spring.
The spring season. The spring season when everybody's playing in the season. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do we have another spring season to compare? No, we don't. If we just saying apples to apples, okay, then that means we need another similar situation to be able to compare data as well, and we don't. We only had that one hiccup in the because of COVID to be able to look at.
Hey, I mean, I'm just saying, when every time it's on a fair comparison, 2018 and the spring season, the FCS was right there with the Celebration Bowl, the SWAC championship, everything. So that's all I'm saying is every single time we've had a data point outside of Jackson State, the FCS is there.
So then that goes back to my original point. They should have been able to keep that going. Grambling, the SWAC, Jackson State, whoever you want to say, were able to keep that in-house, and that situation is on ESPN too. Since we talk about this from a brand perspective.
One thing I will say, Blue, I will say that those is fair points. I like what you said about the spring season in comparison. What I will say is, since the spring season, I believe the SWAC as a conference has made strides to kind of get themselves, because it's one thing to try. It's not really fair to compare them to a Power 5 or even an FBS program simply because of the scholarships, the money, the funding, and things like that. But if we're just compare them to FCS programs, even the top FCS programs, I will say the SWAC as a conference, and you can say say that the top of the SWAC, but I'm gonna just say as a conference has made strides to kind of get themselves on par with some of those programs, or even above, but potentially depending on who you root for, or even above some of those FCS programs. I think getting 2 different streaming deals is big. I think renewing your contract with Cricket in the Celebration Bowl is big. All of those things have made strides for the SWAC. And then I think this season's ratings compared to previous years, I think this season's ratings for Grambling, for Alabama A&M, for, pick your favorite SWAC school, in comparison to some of those other FCS conferences, the CAA, the Big South, the MEAC, or whoever, I think that is going to be critical in seeing how far some of these brands have grown, how far some of these programs have made, some of the strides that some of these programs have made. What about you guys?
Yeah.
Well,
Blue,
Blue, I don't want us to gloss over the original reason why we even having this conversation. I think that we need to touch on that before we go. But I'm gonna let you.
Oh, of course.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, for me, the other thing that gets me, and this is the whole reason I'm passionate about it, is if no matter who it is in the FCS, if it's the MVFC coming up, the CAA coming up, the SWAC coming up, the MEAC coming up, whoever, it's good for the FCS as a whole.
Absolutely.
Because everyone ignores the FCS problem. That, and I get it. It's like we got to get more SWAC players drafted. Not only that, when's the last time that somebody from a CAA program was drafted? When's the last time somebody from the Big South was drafted?
And so you make my point for me.
And so the FCS and the SWAC, I don't like the narrative I don't like, and some of the other channels do it, and it aggravates me, is it's not the SWAC versus the FCS every single time. It should be a collective effort to bring everybody up, because if a bunch of players from Eastern Washington, Tennessee State, Grambling, Jackson State, if they all combine and have 20 players drafted in the NFL draft, it's not going to happen. But let's just say 20. That is good for everybody, because guess what they're doing when they're scouting that player? They're seeing Southern. They're seeing North Carolina A&T. They're seeing FAMU. It doesn't have to be this conflict every time. But the reason that I was so vocal about it is because every time I hear somebody talk about it, it's always, oh, the SWAC is this, F the FCS, F this program. It's like, no,
I did not say that.
No. This isn't about you. This is about you. This is about other channels and Twitter. If you say F the FCS, you're effing yourself. Like, you are FCS. Like, that's stupid to me. And so I don't understand why everyone just thinks it's SWAC versus everybody, because it's not.
Well, let me help you just a little bit. Because you said that the SWAC is trying to get people to the draft. So Absolutely. That's another thing that the SWAC is leading on when you talk about, because we're talking about brands, right? So that is another strong point for the SWAC. Jackson State and Coach Prime. Shout out to the fans also for always showing up big and doing what they need to do to support their school, and that's it. Coach Prime is he's the head, but he really gives his fans and stuff red meat to keep them engaged, and they do their part. So shout out to them.
Absolutely. Blue, go ahead and close this out, buddy.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having us both on. And, man, for everyone out in the Twitter spaces, man, I mean, there were some people that, really think that all three of us had, some beef. We're all good. I mean, trust me.
I never met y'all. So I don't have any I never met.
Listen, there's no ill will. We could disagree and everything like that and still be cool, man. So for all those people out there that think that we hate it, because I think someone even put a quote that was like, y'all shouldn't fight. I was like, we aren't fighting. I feel like we're just debating opposite sides, man. So, man, I appreciate you having us on. Yes, I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you guys. You guys can follow them at the Blue Bloods and at the Icon in Yard Talk TX. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Peace. Appreciate